The story of the real Godfather of Harlem. Harlem, 1930s. A neighborhood alive with music, art, and dreams, but shadowed by poverty, corruption, and crime. The streets were filled with people chasing hope, yet many found themselves trapped in a cycle they could not escape. Amidst this backdrop, a young man would rise to become both feared and revered, a man whose name would echo through the alleys and nightclubs of Harlem for decades. His name was Bumpy Johnson, a figure who would earn the title of the Godfather of Harlem. But Bumpy was more than a gangster. He was a strategist, a protector, and a legend who walked the fine line between criminal empire and community guardian. Tonight, we will uncover the story of the real Godfather of Harlem, exploring his rise, his battles, and the legacy he left behind. Born in the heart of Harlem in 1905, Ellsworth Raymond Johnson, known to the world as Bumpy, entered a life that would be defined by hardship and resilience. His early years were far from easy. Harlem was a city of contrasts, with beautiful brownstone streets and vibrant music halls, but also tenements, crime, and hunger. Bumpy learned quickly that survival required more than strength. It required intelligence, cunning, and respect. From a young age, he navigated the dangerous streets, observing the hustlers, the gangsters, and the influential men who controlled the neighborhood's underworld. He watched, he learned, and he adapted. The harsh reality of poverty shaped him, but it also sharpened his mind. By the time he reached his teenage years, Bumpy was already making a name for himself in the local scene. Small hustles, quick decisions, and an uncanny ability to read people set him apart from others. People began to notice his calm confidence, his willingness to take risks, and the unique sense of loyalty he demanded from those around him. Harlem was changing, and so was Bumpy Johnson. The city was a chessboard, and he was learning to play every piece. By the time Bumpy reached his 20s, Harlem was a battleground for power and influence. Gangs fought over territory, numbers, and respect, and the city's nightlife thrived under the shadow of organized crime. Bumpy understood that brute force alone would not make him a king. He needed alliances, strategy, and a reputation that demanded attention. His first significant encounters with the larger crime world came through local hustlers and small-time mobsters who recognized his sharp mind and fearless demeanor. He learned the art of negotiation, the importance of loyalty, and the deadly consequences of betrayal. One of his earliest mentors taught him that survival was not about eliminating every enemy, but about understanding them, predicting their moves, and striking only when necessary. Bumpy absorbed every lesson, observing the way people spoke, moved, and made deals. This intuition would become one of his most powerful weapons. As Harlem's nightlife boomed with jazz clubs and speakeasies, Bumpy saw opportunities others overlooked. He stepped into the gambling and numbers rackets, carefully building his own network of trusted men, while maintaining a low profile with the authorities. He was meticulous, ensuring every operation was organized and profitable, but he never lost sight of the streets that raised him. People in the neighborhood began to whisper his name with both respect and fear. He was no longer just another hustler, he was becoming a force that could not be ignored. But with power came rivals. Other gangsters wanted control, and alliances were fragile. Every decision Bumpy made had consequences, and every move was a calculated risk. Yet, even as threats loomed, his reputation for fairness and his strategic mind allowed him to navigate the dangerous waters of Harlem's criminal underworld. He understood that to rule, he needed more than muscle. He needed respect, intelligence, and an unshakable presence that commanded loyalty from his men and caution from his enemies. Bumpy's rise was not sudden. It was methodical. While other men relied solely on violence to assert dominance, Bumpy combined brains with brawn. He studied the streets like a chessboard, predicting moves, identifying weaknesses, and positioning himself where others couldn't reach. His ability to balance fear and respect set him apart. People knew that crossing him would have consequences, but they also knew that loyalty was rewarded. Harlem's residents, even those outside the criminal world, began to see him not only as a gangster, but as a protector. He helped families in need, ensured that local businesses were left alone, and intervened when injustices threatened his community. This duality, both feared and respected, made Bumpy unique. As his power grew, so did his connections. He rubbed shoulders with notorious figures of the time, including powerful mob bosses who controlled the larger city's criminal networks. Yet Bumpy always maintained his independence, refusing to be anyone's puppet. He understood the delicate balance of power. One wrong alliance or betrayal could topple him, and he had seen too many men fall because they underestimated the stakes. At the height of his influence, Bumpy controlled vast operations, from gambling dens to numbers games, always careful to keep the streets on his side. But the higher he climbed, the more dangerous his world became. Rivals plotted against him. Law enforcement intensified its scrutiny, and the very city he sought to protect became a labyrinth of threats and opportunity. Yet through it all, Bumpy remained calm, calculated, and unflinching, earning the kind of legendary status that few men ever achieve. In the eyes of Harlem, he was not just a criminal, he was a king. Despite the growing threats around him, Bumpy never lost his connection to the people of Harlem. While other crime figures operated in isolation, he understood that his power depended on the neighborhood's support. He made it a point to walk the streets, greet residents, and ensure that his presence was felt, not through intimidation alone, but through influence. When disputes arose, he acted as a mediator, settling conflicts that could otherwise spiral into violence. This combination of authority and benevolence made him both respected and feared. Rival gangs tried to challenge his control, but Bumpy's reputation for strategic thinking and swift, precise action kept them at bay. Every decision was measured, every move intentional. He was known for his ability to predict betrayals, sense danger before it arrived, and strike decisively when necessary. Yet, Bumpy's life was far from just power and crime. There were personal moments, family, friendships, and a code he never broke. Loyalty was everything to him, and betrayal was met with consequences that were both calculated and unforgettable. Even as the world around him changed, with new threats emerging and law enforcement tightening its grip, Bumpy adapted. He understood that survival required flexibility as much as strength. His legacy was built not on mindless violence, but on a mastery of people, power, and perception. Harlem in the mid-20th century would never be the same, and the story of Bumpy Johnson would be remembered long after his name was first whispered in the streets. He became a symbol of the complex duality of power, both a criminal mastermind and a protector of his community, a man who could inspire fear, command respect, and leave a mark on history that no one could erase. As Bumpy solidified his position, the criminal landscape of Harlem began to shift. Larger organized crime families from outside the neighborhood saw the potential of controlling Harlem's lucrative rackets, and they underestimated Bumpy at their peril. He faced constant pressure from outside forces, men who controlled vast territories and expected submission from anyone in their path. But Bumpy refused to yield. He negotiated when necessary, fought when unavoidable, and always remained several steps ahead of those who sought to challenge him. His reputation spread beyond Harlem. He became a figure both feared and admired across New York City. But even kings faced threats from within. Trusted allies could turn into rivals, and one wrong move could ignite violence that would consume everything he had built. Bumpy's intelligence was his shield. He watched, listened, and learned, ensuring that betrayal was always caught before it could cause irreparable damage. Yet, despite the dangers, he remained deeply connected to his neighborhood. He funded local businesses, helped struggling families, and maintained a presence that reminded Harlem that its protector was still watching. This relationship with the community was not just image, it was survival. The people of Harlem were his strength, and he knew it. Over time, Bumpy's legend grew, not only as a crime boss, but as a man who could command loyalty through respect rather than fear alone. His story was a lesson in strategy, resilience, and the complex nature of power. Every challenge he faced, every rival he outmaneuvered, solidified his place in history as the real Godfather of Harlem, a man whose influence would outlive the streets he once ruled. But power, no matter how carefully managed, comes at a cost. Bumpy Johnson lived in a world where every ally could become a rival, and every decision carried life or death consequences. Nights were filled with tension, meetings with mobsters whose intentions were never fully revealed, and streets that could turn hostile in an instant. Law enforcement was relentless, watching his every move, ready to strike at the first mistake. Yet, Bumpy navigated these dangers with a combination of intelligence, patience, and an almost instinctive sense of timing. He understood that true power was not in acting quickly, but in knowing when to act at all. And while he maintained a fearsome reputation, he never allowed that to cloud his judgment. He continued to foster relationships in the community, building a network of loyalty that extended beyond fear. Parents, shopkeepers, and neighbors saw him not only as a leader, but as someone who would protect Harlem from outside threats. This duality, criminal and protector, made Bumpy a legend in his own time. Rival gangs eventually learned that confronting him directly was futile. The man who could predict moves before they were made had already turned the streets into his own chessboard. His name became synonymous with both caution and respect. Tales of his calculated power, his sense of justice within the criminal world, and his unwavering control spread far beyond Harlem. inspiring both fear and admiration. Even as decades passed and the city evolved around him, Bumpy remained an indelible force. A man whose life demonstrated that influence was as much about intellect and strategy as it was about muscle and reputation. As the years went on, Bumpy faced new challenges. The Harlem he had once known was changing. New gangs were rising, the civil rights movement was stirring, and the outside world increasingly encroached on his territory. But Bumpy adapted. He forged alliances with politicians, business owners, and other influential figures, ensuring that his influence extended beyond the streets. His name became more than a criminal title. It became a symbol of Harlem's power and resilience. Even when arrested or targeted, he maintained an aura of control, never allowing circumstances to dictate his fate. Those who had once tried to topple him learned that Bumpy Johnson was not a man to be underestimated. Yet for all his power, he remained loyal to his roots. Harlem's people knew he would step in to prevent injustice, mediate disputes, and protect those who had nowhere else to turn. It was this combination of fear, respect, and loyalty that truly cemented his legend. Stories of his life began to spread, capturing the imagination of writers, filmmakers, and historians. They marveled at a man who could walk the line between crime and community, a man who could command respect from gangsters and ordinary citizens alike. Bumpy Johnson's legacy was not built on violence alone. It was built on intelligence, strategy, and an understanding of people that few men possessed. By the time his life drew to a close, he had become an icon, a figure whose story would be retold for generations. His name would live on, not just as the Godfather of Harlem, but as a symbol of the complex power, resilience, and humanity that defined one of the most legendary figures in American history. Bumpy Johnson passed away in 1968, leaving behind a Harlem forever shaped by his presence. The streets he once ruled remembered him not only as a gangster, but as a protector, a man who understood the delicate balance between power and responsibility. His life was a testament to intelligence, strategy, and unwavering loyalty, a story of survival, influence, and legacy that could not be ignored. Even decades later, the legend of Bumpy Johnson continues to inspire books, films, and television, reminding the world of the real Godfather of Harlem, a man whose impact went far beyond crime, leaving an indelible mark on the city he loved and the people he defended. This is the story of Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, a man who became a king in his time, and whose name will never be forgotten.